Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Sport Limerick Soccer Podcast. We've had a couple of weeks break now, so we're back refreshed, and we're actually joined by someone who you might not recognise after he was missing just before the break in Jason O'Connor. You haven't changed too much, Jason. You must be refreshed now after almost a month off from us.
I am, Adrian. As you know, we were talking, I lost a good friend of mine, so Ned Green, may rest in peace. So that was a difficult couple of weeks for me, but I'm glad to be back. Yeah,
absolutely. It was obviously a terrible tragedy, and we extend our sympathies to the Green family and friends as well of Ned Green, who's obviously entrenched in soccer locally and nationally as well. Jason, I know that Noel, while you were gone, your trusted compatriot here, Noel O'Connor, was quick to point out that it wasn't the suspension, like maybe on the field 20 odd years ago. It was definitely above board, that you had not done anything wrong.
No, for once, Adrian, at one point I was the most carded man in the League of Ireland, so I'll allow Noel that one. He's quick to remind me of it, but we'll let it go this time. There's no
Yeah. No fighting this time. It's just, suppose we weren't the only ones on a break, Jason. We took the time to have a break because obviously all electricity league clubs were in their mid-season break for June. I suppose, firstly, we'll say, do you think that the break came at a good time, particularly for Treaty United, and do you think it probably was beneficial for them?
Definitely came at the right time, Adrian. The lads were beginning to look a little bit tired, and while a great result against Bray, don't get me wrong, fortunate in my eyes to get the 3 points. Bray could have been out of sight, in my opinion, by half-time. 2 substitutions by Tommy probably changed it, in the second half, even up until the first goal anyway. There wasn't much change in Treaty. They look leggy, they look tired. Lads are obviously carrying knocks, and it's kind of been a familiar 13 or 14 players that we've seen representing the squad. So it's definitely come at the right time, but I suppose we spend a lot of time talking about the players and who's doing well. I think it's important to give Tommy a mention. He's done a fantastic job, let's be fair to him. The hand he was dealt, we know, not the best one at the start of the season, but he was the one that put the squad together. He's the one that put the backroom staff together. And for me, there's been a big change in his approach based on what I've seen from Treaty so far this season. A kind of shift away from the total football approach that didn't really serve him too well in the past. So he's been brave to change, and I think it's important for us to note that, he's doing a fantastic job there at the moment. The break came at a really good time, got a chance to rest some bodies. We know there's still a couple carrying injuries going into tomorrow night, but definitely give the legs a chance to rest and a chance to regroup.
Yeah, do you agree with that assertion, Noel, that it was a good time for Treaty? Because obviously you'd have some people that would say they bounced back from the defeat against Cavantilly, which would have been probably their worst performance, we'll say, of the whole round of fixtures, and got the victory over Bray. But do you still think that because of the signs of the performance in the first half, before the changes were made, that it did come at the right time, particularly for individual players too?
Yeah, I think on balance, it did come at the right time for him. And I'd echo everything that Jason said. And he's right about Tommy as well. He's done a really, really good job. He certainly has changed. He's more, expansive game, which at times didn't serve him very well. But you only have to look at the results they've got. And they'll certainly be looking forward to the second half of the season now. I think it came at the right time because there certainly are players that seems to be carrying knocks, as well as the guys, who were playing. You're talking about the likes of Dean George and Joel Coustrain, who's kind of in and out, weren't sure whether he was right or not. And hopefully they took the time, in those 2 weeks to get themselves absolutely right. But in general, you say when you've won a match, you can't wait for the next one. And, from that point of view, they'll probably be disappointed, but that's the only real facet of a disadvantage from this break. Other than that, I think it's advantage all the way for Treaty, getting those 2 weeks to rest and recuperate and, to recharge the batteries for the next part of the league.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with you on both counts. Jason, they go into the game Friday evening. They make the longest trip of the season to play Wexford in Ferrycarrig Park. It would be a tough task in this division at any time, to be honest, but it's going to be tougher again now because you have Wexford are now buoyed by a new manager coming in Ian Ryan. That always gets a bounce from players regardless when they are struggling. And not to mention that they picked up their first victory against Cabinteely as well. So, it might even be that tiny bit tougher than it may have been a month ago.
Definitely, Adrian. You quite rightly mentioned the change of manager, and they got that bounce straight away. And we spoke about it. They signed Larkin Fitzgerald as well, who's a really, really good player in this division, and they got the result against Cabinteely. So that's kind of a monkey off their back, I suppose, to use that phrase. That's when you're waiting for your first win, it's always hanging over you in games, even when it's 0-0 or you're 1-0 up, them doubts are in your head. So they've all been banished now, I suppose, from the group, in Wexford, and got a little report on the Cabinteely game. And while not a great game, they were good value for the win. They lined up 3-4-1-2 more than a 3-5-2, and Larkin Fitz was one of the three centre-backs for them, orchestrating things in the back, keeping them organised, and was excellent for someone who hadn't played a game, in months. They had three in the midfield, Connolly and Crowley, and Manahan was the furthest forward of the three. And they had two up top, which is going to be very, very interesting for me because, as you know, I'm a big fan of getting two up top and playing kind of 3-5-2 or variations of it. But, they'd Kyle Robinson and Jack Doherty up top. And if we cast our mind back to the Cabinteely game that Treaty were defeated in, they had two up top. They went 4-4-2 that day. And I felt after that game, they out-Treaty that day. Cabinteely did. They did everything to Treaty that Treaty had been doing to the clubs in the past. And I think it'll be more of the same on Friday night. It's not going to be an easy game for Treaty. They're going to have to approach it correctly. They're going to have to get back to their disciplined selves, and try and make it difficult and be patient in their play and not to be overplaying in the wrong areas. I think if they do that, there'll be good value for maybe a point, but I wouldn't be expecting anything more than a point, Adrian. I think it would be a little bit too much to ask to go there and turn Wexford over. And some people looking at the table might think I'm off the mark with that one, but it's my opinion. I think Wexford will be very, very well organised. I mentioned Larkin Fitz. He'll be a huge asset to them. The two up front is going to be difficult for Treaty to manage. And obviously Treaty have a few injuries themselves to key players. I believe Sean McSweeney is out. And he's going to be a big, big miss for them. So if they can come away with a point, I think it'll be a good result.
Yeah, out-treated Treaty. I definitely, I couldn't have said it better myself, to be honest. But I'd have to agree. And Noel, it's going to be difficult, obviously, for Tommy, because I was going to ask you, would Treaty have learned anything from the first time in the first encounter they played Wexford? But that really goes out the window now with a new management team. And obviously there's been a transfer. I know you have the LOI TV system, but it is going to be very difficult to gauge now for Tommy, in what way Wexford will line out. I know Jason has spoken a bit about it, but as I said, that now your research as such kind of almost goes out the window. It makes it even more difficult, I suppose.
Yeah, there's a few more things coming out. Like, obviously they're delighted with the appointment down there now, and it isn't just the Cabinteely game. Say last week they had an hour defeat to Bray, and they only conceded a 95th minute goal to Galway, and the reports from that game was that they were full value, maybe to even nick the 3 points themselves. Not a mate to come away with nothing. He looked for a 2.5-year deal below the Ian Ryan. He's quite ambitious. And he's hungry for success. And in terms of what's happening down there, it seems that the attention to detail has gone up, to a higher notch. And they have really set themselves up every week in relation to, to who they're playing. So I don't think you could read anything into the game in the Markets Field in the last series. And this is certainly a game, and it'll be interesting to see what he does, and I'm sure that he will be looking at probably the Cabinteely game that Treaty played, and maybe the UCD game as well, and how they were troubled in that game, particularly with wide attacks and particularly targeting the right full area and what Cabinteely did in terms in the middle of the field, where they actually took on the likes of Clyde O'Connell and Jack Lynch, and just made it very uncomfortable for them. So this is the word that's coming out. Obviously, the break was something that they didn't want, because they were after getting their first win and they were mad for another game. So certainly a difficult game for Treaty, and I think that it'll be difficult for them to get the 3 points down there.
Yeah, people will, as you said, Jason, you alluded to it already, people may think we're being overly cautious, because if you were just to look at the tables, you'd say, Treaty in 4th and Wexford in 10th, but that doesn't tell the story of this division at all, week in, week out. Anyway, and not to mention, on top of that, what I also failed to mention is that Treaty haven't picked up an away victory yet in the Airtricity League First Division, and that will be one box they really will want to tick as well, Jason. So it is going to be difficult to do that, but you'd imagine the longer it goes on, the harder it will be as such.
Definitely, Adrian, you rightly said there, it's near impossible, I suppose, to predict results. You can see that from Noel most weeks there. No, it is, seriously, it's impossible to be predicted results in the league. You can't be looking at the league table. Everyone is capable of beating everyone, with the exception of Shelbourne. Don't get me wrong. I think, without putting a damper on it, unless they completely implode, they're going to win the league. UCD very, very strong, but other than that, I think everyone is capable of beating each other, and it's going to be no different on Friday night. You mentioned there, Treaty don't have an away win to their name so far this season, and I suppose, look, that's indicative of Tommy's approach. He's trying to pick up points along the way. I know he mentioned in an interview with yourself there recently that this section of the league, he might need to turn them draws into wins, but that even in itself shows you Tommy's mindset, I suppose, has changed a little bit, because he would have been glad of draws and he was setting up to get points away from home. So that's kind of a reflection of the first part of the season. If Treaty are serious about making the playoffs, which I suppose maybe is their goal at the moment, then they will need to start picking up wins away from home. But in this division, Adrian, that's a lot easier said than done. And that'll be noted again on Friday night in Ferrycarrig Park, because you go away to anyone in this division, they're not handing up points cheaply to you, and they're not handing up chances, so it's very, very difficult. And as I said, if they do get a point on Friday, I think you will be happy with it overall.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Noel, it's going to be a crucial part of the season now coming up, because obviously we say it's a mid-season break, but we haven't actually reached the halfway point yet. There's still you have 10 games played, we've got 27 to play. So, it's going to be, there's a long way to go. The next 5 weeks, though, when we do get to the halfway point and over it, are going to be crucial, maybe in terms of, do you believe they will be crucial, in terms of shaping the division? Because when I was talking to Tommy at the start of the season, that's the kind of period he said where you'll start to see the division taking shape. Now, he seems to, I've gauged from listening to him, that he feels like he's changed his mind a bit and doesn't know now whether it will be around the 14 or 15 game mark. But do you think that the next 4 or 5 weeks will tell a story in this division overall and for Treaty?
Yeah, we're looking at it at the moment, and I can't remember who'd actually predicted Shelbourne to win the league, but you can always look that up and see. It looks like that they are going to win the league, and you'd really, really fancy UCD to be one of those playoff places. So there's 3 of those up for grabs, if you like. And looking at the table, and while we'll see an improvement in Wexford and Cove, they'll have it all to do maybe to impact on that. So there's 6 teams going for 3 places, and I suppose the key for Treaty is that they stay in touch there, and right down to the last game of the season, if they are in with a chance of making the playoffs, well, then it's going to be deemed a success, as a season. And even if you saw with 4 or 5 games to go that they were in with that chance and there was crowds back in the Marcus Field, I'm sure you'd see very big crowds going, where there's something at stake. Whereas if that playoff place was guaranteed, which is obviously a bit odd, but that's just the way it is, well then, you mightn't see half the attendance. So I'm sure the most important thing for them is to stay in touch. Just keep in touch and distance of those playoff places, whether you're in it or maybe a couple of points out, and keep that chance alive as long as you can until the end of the season. But I suppose the way the league is shaping up now, and you'll find teams maybe that weren't in form the first 10 games will now hit a bit of form after the break. It still could be all up in the air bar maybe the top 2 places after 14 or 15 games, and still well up in the air.
Yeah, I suppose that would be the case, because outside of Shelbourne and maybe even UCD, like you said, Noel, it definitely is all up for grabs, and Wexford maybe at the other end. Do you agree with that, Jason? Do you think that it'll take longer than maybe the next 4 or 5 weeks? And then a second kind of part of that, obviously coming from the camp in Treaty, is we'll take it one game at a time, as you'll hear all the time in media circles. But if they were to be right in the mix in the top 5 in the next few weeks, they will no longer be able to deny that they're playoff challengers then.
Well, definitely. Noel is spot on in what he's saying, and when we look at the table, it goes all the way down for me to 8th position with Cork. If they do manage to turn things around, they're only a win and possibly a draw or 2 wins away from being in that mix themselves, and even with the games this week, you're looking at it, and if Galway were to beat Athlone, obviously that'll put them right back into the mix as well, so it's very, very tight, and it's a great league to be watching this year. It really is. It's a great advert for Irish football. It's very, very competitive. Every team has probably 1 or 2 standout players that are really, really good, and see, there's a transfer window coming up as well, Adrian, and people like UCD might be worried that Colin Whelan might be whipped from them, and you don't know if things like that can change it. You'd imagine Galway have the resources to go out and buy a striker. That could change it for them. Obviously Cork City need a striker as well, in my eyes. Whether they have the money to go out and get one, again, I wouldn't be privy to that information, but there's nothing in it. There really isn't. And depending on what way results go this week, Treaty could find themselves out of the playoff positions. Galway could find themselves back in there. It's very, very interesting, but Noel is spot on. It's important that they keep within the pack, and that's my reason for saying, I suppose, that a point on Friday would be a good result, and okay, 4 wins and 4 draws for Treaty. Tommy might be saying we have a lot of draws, need to turn them into wins, but when you're going away to Wexford, long distance, he'd definitely take a point this week, win their home games, and when the crowds come back, as Noel said, be within that group, that playoff spots, and the place could be rocking.
Yeah, I did note, actually, it was a good point you made, Jason. I did note that Stephen Bradley was actually in attendance when I was up watching UCD versus Treaty. So that will tell you, UCD has been a hotbed in recent years for top Dublin clubs and clubs in League of Ireland in general to take their players. So, a situation like that could change things for a number of clubs if when the transfer window works out in some ways for them. Noel, and it's kind of a different team, I suppose. It's an interesting fact that Wexford have only been in, is this their 15th season, I think, in the league, or it could be the 14th. I know 2007 was the inception of Wexford, excuse me. It's interesting to note that this just shows the way Limerick soccer is, I suppose, and that this is the 3rd Limerick entity to play in Wexford. You had Limerick 37, Limerick FC, obviously, for the most part, and now Treaty United travelling to play Wexford. And I meant to clear this with you before we got on the show, and now I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure you were involved with Wexford in 2008, and Limerick FC went to Wexford. It's a well-known story now. There was an issue with the warm-up availability of a warm-up on the actual main pitch, and Mike Curley issued his team back onto the bus, and Limerick FC did not fulfil the fixture and were heavily fined. I know I was speaking to Tommy Barrett a bit tongue-in-cheek about it because he was playing on the night, or due to play, excuse me, and he said that the players had backed the manager on the night because of the treatment that they received from the Wexford stewards and Wexford officials, Noel. But I suppose it's one of those situations you look back on now if you were Mike Curley, and you might say, I should have probably played under protest.
Yeah, I think you just should have played the game. I was there, actually, and I suppose all I felt was a bit of shock. Every team that had since we started had warmed up. Now, they call it the back pitch, but it was a bit rich coming from Limerick, certainly at the time, because, and they still don't have a training pitch or any kind of pitch to call their own. The pitch, it's the back pitch, but it's the first one you see on the left. Every other team, including, I think, Derry could have been in the league that year. I think Shelbourne could have been in the league that year. They all came down and warmed up on that, and that was what was happened. And Limerick had an issue with the lighting. I know we warmed up ourselves out there, and it was fine as well. And it was interesting to hear Tommy saying that the players back the manager, but you think that it's the manager should be making the decisions anyway, and not maybe asking the players for counsel. But anyway, it resulted in a heavy fine, as you said, but more importantly, a 3-0 victory for Wexford Youth. So they were certainly a valuable 3 points, because it's no different to now. Every 3 points was vital in those days as well.
Yeah, I know as a young supporter, it was quite puzzling when you saw what unfolded, especially considering the distance that the team had travelled, and it was a Monday night fixture as well, where people would have probably had to take off work. So it really was puzzling that the team didn't play. No, it's no slight criticism on anyone in particular, but it just probably should have been played under protest. That was just a little side thing that I say we'd bring up, because it's amazing, really. It just shows you probably the inconsistency in Limerick soccer, that we have had 3 entities playing in Wexford in a 14-year period as well. Jason, another thing that I know perplexed you in recent weeks was when Tommy spoke after the Bray game, and I know we had Ed Mccarthy obviously playing the number 10 role, and in the second half in particular had a growing influence on the game, had a couple of shots, was creating things in which is good to see, considering it was a weak point when Sean McSweeney's out. You don't know who was going to come in there, so it was good to see it. But after the game, Tommy said that he had toyed with the idea of playing Ed McCarthy at right back in the week leading up to the game, and I have to say myself, I haven't really seen any attributes in Ed McCarthy to say that, you know, right back would be a position for him. Maybe I'd definitely prefer to use him further up the field, and I know that you probably agree with that.
100%, Adrian. I couldn't make head nor tail of that remark of Tommy, to be honest. Normally you get a bit of cryptic messages from Tommy on different things, and he's playing the game with the media, but that was a very, very strange one for me. Ed McCarthy, as far as I'm concerned, when he came in at the start of the season, I was quick to flag that he was playing out of position, he was playing in wide areas, and his natural position is in the middle of midfield. Very, very good technical player. And I suppose, look, for me, what he's become and what he should become is the flagship player for Treaty, in the sense of he represents everything that the club kind of stand for, in my eyes. You know, a Limerick City boy, grew up in a tough area by Ross, you know, really concentrated on his football all his life. Didn't get distracted like plenty other people, not only in my Ross, but across Limerick City. Very, very disciplined lad, you know, and excellent technically. You quite rightly said, did 2 excellent strikes against Bray. And for those that watch it closely, it was one with either foot. You know, and if you look at it, there wasn't too many or too much difference in the power. I know one of them hit the post, the other one was narrowly wide, but he used both feet striking the ball, and he's fantastic technically. He's going to need time to adjust, obviously, to this level, and he was doing that by playing in the wide areas. So when he got a chance in the middle of the field, I was delighted. I think he can grow into that position, you know, given the chance. Like yourself, I don't see any attributes that will make him a right back in any shape or form. I think he should be given the chance to develop in the middle of the field. And, you know, locally, there's a lot of talk about him outside of the media. I know Pike Rovers very, very proud of him. My FEI colleague, Declan Considine, done a lot of work with Edward in his younger days. I'm sure he's very proud of him. His family, very, very supportive. I know his dad, Pa, very, very supportive of Edward all the way through his career. And I think he should be given the chance now, especially with Sean McSweeney out of the team, to fill in that role, gain more confidence, grow into the position. Do you know, let's be fair, who dreams of being a right back? Do you know?
Gary Neville's statement out of you, Jason.
100%, no one does. Do you know, so give the lad kind of the bit of credit that he deserves. Do you know, push him on in that position. When Sean McSweeney's out, play him in there. When Sean is back, put him back on the right or left side and let him learn his trade even more, you know, and he is someone that, as I said, kind of epitomises, I suppose, what Treaty are about. So certainly remarks like that make me very, very confused.
Yeah, I'm sure Jack Lynch and Charlie Fleming there, if they see this, will have their heads sinking into their boots when they hear that there's nobody what dreams to be a right back, Jason. But yeah, look, Noel, I know that obviously Jason paid homage there to Ed McCarthy and his development. We know there's going to be changes because I'm pretty sure Clyde O'Connell on top of Sean McSweeney is definitely ruled out of this Friday one or two doubts as every week as well. But is there any player in particular, Noel, that you would like to see maybe get more game time that hasn't, we'll say, in the first 10 games?
Yeah, I think Mark McKevitt has been the standout sub for me. I think particularly against Bray when he came on, he opened up the whole pitch, stretched the Bray defence. You know, they had to really think about what was happening behind him, and it wasn't an issue before then. Created a lot of space. He's done that a lot, and I think, you know, if Tommy is thinking about turning those away draws into wins, well, I think you have to have a guy who can run in behind the opposition if you want to hurt them on the break, and it's something that we haven't had. In fairness to Red O'Hanlon, he gives us something different. He plays with his back to the goal. He links up the play well. He scores some lovely goals. But if you really want to stretch a team, and particularly away from home when teams are inclined to come out a bit more, I think I wouldn't mind seeing McKevitt get a start and see how he gets on. But he's certainly done really, really well in every game that he's come on. He certainly hasn't disappointed me in any of his minutes on the pitch.
Yeah, I know that obviously we've discussed the Wexford game now in decent detail, so I'm just going to ask you for a quick score prediction, even though we kind of know what way you're both leaning as of now. But anyway, Jason, start with yourself for Wexford versus Treaty.
I'll go 1-1, Adrian. I think, as I said, a draw would be very welcome for Treaty. You know, it'll be a good result if they can get it. We're not known for scoring lots and lots of goals. I think Wexford will be a lot harder to break down now with Larkin Fitzgerald in there organising things. So if Treaty come out of there with a 1-1 draw, I think they'll be very, very happy.
What do you think of that, Noel?
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with the draw. I suppose probably 0-0 or 1-1 draw there, but I could certainly see it being a draw.
Yeah, and just to have we're probably caught for time a bit more than we usually are, but we'll do our usual first division predictions, and there's 2 games each for you here that I have marked out. To start with yourself, Jason, big one in the Carlisle grounds. Bray Wanderers are hosting Shelbourne. Again, if you see Shelbourne winning this, it'll just go along with everything everyone's saying that they may run away with the division. Big one at the Carlisle grounds. Bray want to bounce back as well.
They will, but I don't think they'll be able to, Adrian. I think Shelbourne are just getting stronger and stronger as the games go on, and it'll certainly be an away win in my book. Bray were poor against Treaty. They had good chances in the first half, didn't take them, and as we saw, got punished then later on in the game. So I'd be definitely going for a Shelbourne win there.
Yeah, and Noel, to move to yourself, Galway are hosting Athlone, and they'll be desperate to avenge that hiding they got, for the want of a better word, up in Athlone as well. How do you see that one going?
Yeah, it's just you're kind of waiting all the time for Galway to hit a bit of form, and it's not really happening for them. I suppose I'll go for a draw there again, because unless something magical happened in the last 2 weeks in Galway, I think that they're going to struggle another bit. So I see that as being a draw.
And there's a real hard game. Whatever about this division, there's a real hard game to call in Turner's Cross, Jason. Cork versus Cavantilly. I'll leave you take this one away.
Yeah, look, very, very difficult. You know, again, like Noel said, I suppose similar to Galway, we're kind of waiting for Cork to take fire, and it's not happening for them. But I think it might happen against Cavantilly. They've been, in my eyes, punching above their weight. I think it's their organisation and the staff they have in place that are helping get the results for Cavantilly. And while I was very, very impressed with them against Treaty, Cork are at home. They'll want a result. And look, I'll get off the fence and I'll go for a home win with Cork.
Okay, and you've got UCD facing Cove at the Belfield Bowl. Noel, the UCD Bowl. How do you see that one going?
Yeah, it's hard to look beyond the UCD win at home. Cove, while their performances have improved a bit, including a good win below in Cork, I don't think that there'll be a match for UCD away from home. So I'd certainly go for UCD win there.
Yeah, and the reason we kind of skirted through that a bit quick as well is because, Jason, there's also been great news for the club in Treaty United, in that 5 players from the Treaty United senior women's side have been named in Dave Connell's Republic of Ireland under-19s squad. That's just an indication. That's the type of thing that Treaty will want to build on in the future at all levels. Obviously, the underage is going to be starting soon. That's the view and the aim for the club, is obviously to have this occurring on a regular basis. So that was great news to see that those players were included in the squad.
Oh, fantastic, Adrian. And I suppose testament to the work that was done last year by Dave Rooney and Mary Curtin, and continued on with Noel Connolly this year. And I know Noel was getting a bit of stick about the results that he got at the beginning of the season. He's 2 wins under his belt now. And he's someone that worked on our FEI Emerging Talent Programme for a few years and really put in the work with his FEI education and his coach education. And he's a purist in every sense of the word in how he wants the game played, but that's the ultimate goal for the club. We saw with Chidozie Ogbene getting capped as well last night for the Irish senior team, and his affiliation or connection to Limerick soccer, so it's great news and it's fantastic. It really is. So well done to Niall and well done to the club and the ladies.
Yeah, it certainly was great news. And on another note, Noel will say the international scene, a man, as you said, who you know quite well from your League of Ireland managing days, Stephen Kinney, was under immense pressure, and it looked like it was going to really boil over when our Andorra went ahead last week and took a 1-0 lead. I wouldn't have liked to have been Stephen at that stage, but they came back, got 4 goals, relatively comprehensive in the last half an hour. Got a creditable 0-0 draw against Hungary last night as well, so it just eases that pressure on Stephen a bit.
Yeah, I think so. And look, whatever about the Andorra game, and look, it was a good win in the end, 4-1. It only reminded me of how a few years ago, we scraped a 1-0 win in Gibraltar, and there wasn't half the furrow about it. But for some people, the 4-1-0 still wasn't good enough because they were going on about the goal that they conceded, which obviously was very poor, but certainly a fixable goal as well. I thought last night they were excellent. I thought they played really well. And certainly their attitude was spot on, and you were a bit worried maybe with 20 minutes to go that fellas would start to say it'll be all over now in 20 minutes and we're on our summer holidays, whatever, but they stuck right at it. And what an impression that Ogbene did make when he came on. And I'm only disappointed that he didn't take on that last shot and knock kind squares. And certainly in his Limerick days, he certainly wouldn't have passed the ball in those positions and scored a lot of good goals. But listen, he looks a real exciting player, and there's nothing like those players that have the X factor. You talk about relieving a bit of pressure, a little ball over the top, and all of a sudden, he's with one touch, he's inside in the box and has a great chance of scoring. So hopefully he goes from strength to strength after this.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got all the attributes to do so. Thanks very much, Az, for that wide-ranging chat. It's great to be back. People will be sick of our mugs now for the next few months because there's no break, as far as I'm aware, unless maybe we get knocked out of the FAI Cup and decide to take a break. But no, so we'll be here to stay now, and hope you enjoyed the show and tune in again next week. Thank you.
Preview.